Lots of good speakers today. I'm very pleased with the lineup today, talking about some of the upcoming changes in the recycling and resources industry, I think we'll call it. I'm in the process of updating our procedures at Marwell to remove every mention of the word waste, because it's not waste anymore. It's a resource that we should be recycling or reusing as much as possible. So although we've got waste in the agenda, that's definitely not what we're talking about. We're talking about materials that can be reused and should be reused. Might have a little bit of residual in there, but these are all materials that we're going to be finding alternative uses for. So yeah, lots of good speakers today. Just before we start, I want to mention some of our upcoming events. We've got a pair of events around alternative fueled vehicles and sustainable transport coming up. So in 2 weeks' time, we'll be online on a webinar again, talking about alternative fueled vehicles, and particularly what's the business case around them, which is obviously now with the fuel prices a lot better than it used to be, as the vehicles have got cheaper and the fuel price has gone completely nuts. So how do you finance those and how do you get the business case together? And then on the 17th of June, we'll be actually meeting in person up at the University of Winchester, where we'll be actually able to see some of these vehicles. So the university have got a fleet of, I think it's 6 different types of electric vans for different applications. So that'd be a useful opportunity to see these vehicles and think about which one of these could be right for you, whatever your application. And there'll be a number of other vehicles there in terms of electric cars. We talk to people about scooters and cycling. So lots of stuff to talk about and see on site. And then looking a bit further ahead into September, for Winchester Green Week, we're going to be talking about circular economy. And Ella today is going to be giving a bit of introduction to that, about how circular thinking can change the way you look at your business, and particularly this idea that waste isn't actually waste. It's a material that you should be keeping either within your business cycle or within somebody else's business cycle, and keeping those materials within a field of use and reuse. So something to look forward to in September. If you're on our mailing list, you'll hear about these in the normal course of events. So you'll get the invitation to book onto those. Obviously, they're all free. If you're not on the mailing list already, then I would encourage you to join. Otherwise, you'll also hear about them through the usual channels on LinkedIn and social media. So look out for all of those. And then lastly, just to mention, we do have a feedback form. So if you'd like to fill that in as you go through today, that would be very helpful. If you've got a phone handy, you can scan this QR code, which will take you direct to the form. Or if you haven't got a phone handy, hopefully Wendy can post the link into the chat and you can pick it up that way. So I'll just leave that there for a couple of moments while you find your phone and get that one sorted out, and then we'll make a start.
So yes, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at today's SBN event. And as Duncan was saying in his introduction, we've got some really great speakers today, so I won't take up too much of your time going through the legal update. But we've tried to keep today's update really focused on the key theme of today around plastic packaging, extended producer responsibilities, and the deposit return scheme. Just to set the scene, because our speakers today will be going into much more of the detail around this. So this is just designed to give a bit of awareness of kind of what the available sort of resources and guidance that can be used. And the first thing I would just say before going into all of this, there's quite a lot of guidance that I'll be showing that is available for you to use to assess your sort of obligations under each of these schemes. There are 3 hyperlinks at the end of this slide pack that will be available either through the YouTube video or through the slide pack that will take you to all of these resources, so you don't have to scribble these down throughout the slide pack. So the first thing that we'll just go through is an update on the plastic packaging tax. So the aim of this tax is to incentivize businesses to use recycled plastic in the manufacture of plastic packaging. And in turn, that should then create greater demand for that material, which will then stimulate increased levels of recycling of plastic waste. And ultimately, as Duncan was saying right at the start, really divert this away from landfill or incineration and start to treat this as a resource. So what does this apply to? It applies to plastic packaging that's manufactured or imported into the UK that does not contain at least 30% recycled plastic. So it's that 30% that is the really key part of this. And equally, it's important just to understand that plastic packaging isn't just anything that is 100% plastic. It's anything that contains more plastic when measured by weight than any other single substance. So, for example, if a 10-gram packaging component has 4 grams of plastic, 3 grams of aluminium, 3 grams of cardboard, it will be considered plastic packaging for the purpose of this tax, because the plastic element of that is the greatest single substance in the combination. So that's just an important distinction to make for this. So this comes in from the 1st of April 2022 and primarily affects manufacturers and importers of plastic packaging. And there is a threshold for this. So you would need to manufacture or import 10 tons or more of packaging in a 1-year period. And if you do that and you are then obligated under these regulations, the tax will be charged at a rate of £200 per tonne. Now, this is quite a varied piece of legislation in that there are lots of different components of packaging and plastic packaging, and there'll be some that I'll give you some examples of a little later that you might not necessarily have thought were even plastic packaging, but there is a lot of guidance out there to help you to understand and distinguish between what is obligated under these regulations and what isn't. So hopefully, the guidance is set out to really help you through 6 key sort of actions. Firstly, to check which packaging is subject to the plastic packaging tax. And so there's definitions within there. And obviously with manufacturing packaging, there are various different activities that take place throughout the sort of value chain of that item of packaging. So it gives some distinction as to the difference between those and what the obligations are. There's guidance on how to work out the weight of the packaging. There are actually quite a number of different methodologies that can be used to calculate the weight of the packaging. Ranging from sort of individually weighing each item of packaging, or using sample sort of on a manufacturing line, so that you could actually routinely sample to get these sort of average weights, and various other things, about 7 different options sort of through there. They're all quite sort of specific to different manufacturing environments. There's guidance on how to actually register to provide your plastic packaging tax return. There's guidance on the records and accounts that you must keep, and also how to carry out due diligence. Again, this kind of links back to the tax return and to the weight of the packaging. There's also guidance on how you can claim for a credit or defer paying that tax, for example, if it's exported. And then there's detailed guidance on how to complete your return. So I'll just talk you through some of those and the type of guidance that's available. The first is to check if the plastic packaging is in scope. So this is a sort of a simple 4 or 5 page document. You'll be pleased to hear, because many of these documents can extend into many hundreds of pages. But this has got a decision tree in that helps you to go through and assess the type of packaging and whether it be obligated or exempt under these tax regulations. So that's a really good starting point to firstly work out if you check your plastic packaging is in scope. As I mentioned, there are some exemptions. So, for example, if it's for the immediate packaging of licensed human medicine, set aside for non-packaging use, for importing, or used in aircraft, ship and rail stores. So there are some exemptions sort of through there as well. Although this looks like it's the same guidance document, it's the same picture, but it is differently titled. So this is a separate piece of guidance on checking if you need to register and are liable for the plastic packaging tax. As I sort of mentioned, there's various kind of stages at which these tax obligations might become applicable to you. So it gives guidance on, for example, the stages of manufacturing, whether you're importing, whether you're completing the last manufacturing process, and even kind of getting to the volume part of it. So whether it's 10 tons or more in the next 30 days, and equally, the retrospective element of this, if you produce 10 tons or more in the past 12 months. Obviously, it only applies from the 1st of April in the first year. So it just gives the guidance on how you would actually end up needing to register and become liable for this. And there's also guidance on what's in and out. So I sort of mentioned earlier that there are a variety of things that you may be kind of going, does this count? Is this something that is included? And there's 7 different kind of themes for different types of plastic packaging across supply chains, single-use packaging, primary function for storage, integral part of the good, primarily for presentation, non-packaging, and transport packaging. So for each of these, there is a very extensive list of what is included and what is excluded. So just to give some ideas of the type of things we're talking about that are included would be things like plastic bags, disposable cups, yogurt pots, plastic wine or beer glasses, ready meal pouches and packets, and single-use bottles. Things that wouldn't be included are things like bags for life, reusable coffee cups, DVD cases, glasses cases, and coffee capsules. So it's quite clear in sort of some of the things that you might be a bit unsure of whether they apply or not, but there are hundreds of items that are listed within these various bits of guidance. So it's really worth, it's a good resource to kind of check out what would be included or not. So what would you need to include in your packaging return if you were obligated and you did meet the criteria? It is plastic, it is in scope, it is liable, it's greater than the 10-ton threshold. We submit a return to HMRC 4 times a year, and that covers the accounting periods we've got on screen, so April to June, July to September, October to December, and Jan to March. And then you submit the return and you pay your tax no later than the last working day of the month following the end of that accounting period that you're reporting for. So in terms of what you would include in that, and this, again, it's worth looking back to the guidance on what you need to do and the due diligence and the the processes that you would follow to measure the weights. You would need to essentially report the total weight of all finished plastic packaging components that are subject to the tax, and those that are also not subject to the tax as well, because part of this is about a monitoring process. You then would calculate in the tax return the total tax that is due and provide a declaration that the information is true and correct. And just some, little notes on this, but everything needs to be provided in kilograms and rounded down to the nearest kilogram. And if you don't submit a tax return or pay on time, that could result in penalties. So as I say, there's quite a lot of guidance available for this. I think there's sort of, 15 or so different separate areas of guidance for this tax, for which there is one link at the end of this slide pack to take you through to all of those. Well worth having a look at if you feel that you might be obligated. So you can go through those, and they're very user-friendly. They're quite sort of clear and prescriptive as to what you would need to do. So the next area, just to provide an overview of, is the extended producer responsibility obligations for packaging. So the producer responsibility obligations have been in force for some time, and essentially is about putting some obligations on producers for placing packaging on the market. So this is quite a well-established system, but it's sort of estimated roughly that the current producer responsibility obligations only really account for 10% or so of the total costs of managing packaging waste at the end of its life. So what that ultimately means is that local authorities and taxpayers end up picking the remaining financial costs to make sure that all this waste is sort of appropriately dealt with. So it's kind of going back to that now polluter pays responsibility under this extended producer responsibility. So what this will see is the cost of that collection shifting from taxpayers to the producers in the hope of delivering a more circular economy for packaging. We've also got a speaker later today who'll give some more information on that. And where greater quantities of recycling are reprocessed into valuable, high quality secondary resources, as opposed to just going into landfill or energy for waste. So that's really what this is about for the extended producer responsibility obligations. Currently, the producer responsibility obligations start at a sort of a de minimis threshold of 50 tonnes or more placed on the market and a £2 million turnover. The extended obligations will bring in a new lower threshold, but for reporting only, so not the financial aspect of this, but just reporting, which would be around the 25 tonnes placed on the market and a £1 million turnover. So it's just going to extend the amount of information that's available on these sort of waste categories. So what would that mean in practice for obligated organisations? Well, there'll be an increased financial incentive to use packaging that can be widely collected from householders, as well as to increase the recycled content in packaging. Additional data will need to be collected and reported. The reporting requirements could become more complex, and there's the introduction of modulated fees, which could see costs increase, and I've got a slide on that just next. But also sort of waste is a devolved activity, so there will need to be reporting completed in each of the devolved administrations as well. So I mentioned that modulated fees, and that is a change from the current sort of producer obligations. So this would be introducing a if you like, sort of a variable rate that will increase or decrease depending on the recyclability of the packaging. So those things that are difficult to recycle or not recycled or unrecyclable will see a higher cost, and therefore it's incentivizing the recyclability and recovery of packaging materials. So again, at the end of the slide, there is a useful link to kind of take you to this guidance around the consultation. And lastly, you've got the deposit return scheme. Essentially, this is a scheme that is in existence in various formats across the world. So it's not something that's completely new, but essentially this is sort of an extended form of producer responsibility as well. And it's aimed at encouraging more people to recycle drinks containers, so things like bottles and cans. And ultimately, a really key part of this is about reducing littering. So essentially, it works on the basis that anyone who buys a drink is charged a small deposit for that bottle or can that it comes in, and they get this money back when they return the bottle or can to a collection point to be recycled. And it puts in obligations on anyone who retails the materials in the scheme may have to act as a return point. So kind of at the point that you essentially purchase, that drink, you would also need to be able to return it there to recover your deposit. So it has in all devolved administrations been delayed slightly due to COVID. So it's going to be introduced first in Scotland in 2023. And in England, expected to start sort of late 2024. So just a bit of context from what the Scottish scheme has been sort of outlined to confirm it will include will be PET bottles, steel and aluminium cans, and glass drinks bottles. It will apply for containers between 50 ml and 3 litres, and Scotland opted for a flat 20p deposit for each container. So that is essentially how that would work. And I think the kind of link between these is that something that is in scope of the deposit return scheme wouldn't be in scope of the extended producer responsibility obligations. So hopefully that's kind of set the scene really, and hopefully today's speakers will then be able to kind of add a bit more detail onto this in practice. But these are the 3 links that we've added in that take you to all of the guidance that we discussed throughout this this update. So it's a really good starting point to get some more information on those. Yes, so without further ado, I will conclude there and hand over to the next speaker.
Thanks very much, Pete. I forgot to mention at the start, but if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we can relay them to the speakers as we go. I just had one, Pete, as we went through that. Obviously, at Marwell, we've got a gift shop, so a lot of the goods that we sell in the gift shop are imported. So I'm unclear whether that makes us an importer of packaging, because most of that packaging obviously is we're the end user of it, so we get all the soft toys and things in boxes that we recycle. But then a number of goods come in display packaging that are you're sold with the product, sort of blister pack type things. So where does that put us on the packaging tax and the sort of producer responsibility? Is that type of packaging obligated, or as an end user, does it not count?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because this will apply, to quite a lot of scenarios. In terms of the sort of extended producer responsibility, I mean, primarily that is designed to kind of sit with the brand owners to then sort of really cascade that responsibility throughout the other kind of parts of the value chain of that. And there's kind of 6 key categories, so there's differential obligations under that. So that's worth looking through the guidance to kind of see exactly how that works, and it really depends on the number of organizations in that and your exact kind of contractual role within that, sort of what you're buying and who you're buying from, and where the kind of the supply chain part of that. And with the packaging tax, again, it will really depend on how integral the packaging is to the end the product that's part of that. So again, it's worth looking through the guidance document for that on what's included and excluded, because there's some things that you might think it is a waste part of it, but actually there's quite a lot of things that are considered an integral part of the product, particularly with kind of display sort of type packaging. So again, it'd be worth kind of going through those, but I think it's quite it's a very product by product basis. So it's hard to give an overall answer, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, bit of reading to do then. I shall look through your links. Okay, so if we haven't got any more questions, if you think of a question later, then do pop it in the chat and we'll come back to Pete at the end. But in the meantime, here is Sophie. She's appeared on our screens. So Sophie, if you want to grab the screen and load your presentation.
Great.
Yeah, we can see that.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And thank you, Peter. That was really useful. So good morning, everybody. I'm Sophie Goodall-Smith from the Environment Agency, and I work in our plastics and sustainability team. So thank you for inviting me here today. Plan to go through a short presentation talking about our Preventing Plastic Pollution project we work on, and an introduction to tackling avoidable plastics in your business. Just move the slide on. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Environment Agency, but just as a quick reminder, we're a non-departmental public body, an environmental regulator, and we work to create a better place for people and wildlife and support sustainable development. We've got a number of roles which are up on the screen there. As you can see, it's quite wide-ranging. We've got 10,000 employees. So why be concerned? As we all know, plastic can be fantastic. There's some great uses for it. For example, as we've seen recently in the pandemic with PPE, but also it can cause an issue. Approximately 12 million tonnes does enter the ocean annually, and 50% of plastic used is for single-use products. I'm sure you're aware the global plastic production is still increasing, as you'll see on the graph on the right. And this has been found all across the planet, Antarctic, Arctic, Mariana Trench, and every bit does still exist unless it's been burnt or buried. Some of the impacts, particularly on wildlife, can be ingestion. This is particularly relevant for microplastics and small fibres that wash from textiles or smaller pieces broken off larger items. It can often look and smell like food. 1 in 3 seabirds directly feed their chicks plastic. And entanglement's also an issue. Items such as plastic bottle rings, fishing line and nets, and plastic bags can tangle marine animals, result in injury, infection, drowning, or even death. So those impacts are quite obvious, I think. What is still being investigated, and there's some evidence, but a lot more research going into, is the impacts of plastic on human health. It is possible that microplastics could be inhaled or ingested via our diet, and some of the potential toxins attached to plastics have been linked so far to our immune system, endocrine system, and cancers. There's a clear link between plastics and climate change. So all of you are looking at your climate change or carbon impacts and net zero policies. Plastics do have a share of global oil consumption, being made of non-renewable fossil fuels. And that has gone from a sort of smaller amount, but predicted to increase as the production of plastic is predicted to increase. And obviously, not only as a raw material, but the extraction, transportation, manufacture and disposal of plastics all contribute to that release of greenhouse gases, and also the photodegradation of plastic. On average, it's been estimated that for 1 tonne of plastic material produced, used and disposed of, the total greenhouse gas emissions are roughly 3 tonnes of carbon dioxide. So I won't go through this. I think Peter's actually already covered it, but just to mention, obviously, that there's some government policies that have already come in. Some of the things that are up on the screen, including the tax that Peter spoke about, and a ban on some items. In the future, we've got the resources and waste strategy, and as again Peter has outlined, there's a number of things coming in there, and also including the consistency, consistent collection of household and business recycling. There was obviously also the recent UN resolution for a global plastic pollution agreement by 2024. So that's quite a significant mark as well on a global scale. You will probably have heard of the Waste Resources and Action Programme, WRAP UK Plastic Pact. And this is a number of large organisations that have come together, supermarkets and others, to come up with some targets to eliminate problematic plastic packaging, for it all to be reusable, recyclable, compostable, for a certain percentage of it, 70% to be recycled or composted, and the 30% minimum recycled content, which links to the tax we just talked about. So yeah, that's quite a big group of organisations that are involved in that programme. You will have heard on the news that there's been an issue with waste exports. So unfortunately, we have a bit of a gap with capacity in the UK to recycle all plastics. So quite a significant proportion is still exported, 61% in 2019. And there's been a number of new rules on shipping plastic waste that have come into force over the last couple of years. And quite a few countries have tightened their restrictions on importing plastic waste as they've seen issues rise, and also as they've improved their own collections for recyclables in the countries. They want to be dealing with their own waste and don't have the capacity to take others. This has led in the past to quite a few illegal waste export and disposal issues. And an example is, there's been a couple of big fines for exporting some items that have been poorly sorted, which have ended up having other items and contaminants in. There's not been always the resources to check these before they go, and they're sent off quite often with very good intention, but not always knowing kind of what always happens to them at the other end. But there are new measures being put in place to check these export better and to deal with those issues. So we're trying to shift to the circular economy. We've got Ella talking a bit more about that later. This is a diagram from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We have a Environment Agency 7-point plan for plastics that is actually focusing trying to go for the circular economy approach. So what are we doing? We are in the Environment Agency, mentioned, got a 7-point plan. As a number of different teams work on this. We're trying to expand our evidence base, increase the use of our waste powers and new waste legislation, deal with microplastics in the water environment, plastics in the supply chain, and then also try to raise public awareness and work with, collaborate with other organisations. Some of those organisations we work with is to support NGOs, businesses and communities to help them take actions and initiatives, as well as us taking action ourselves to understand the impact of plastics and then what we can do about it. On the regulatory side, this is a big role for the Environment Agency. We aim to take steps to stop pollution causing harm, where we can clearly attribute the substance to a site or operator. And this is the tricky bit. Sometimes we might find plastic nurdles on the beach. This happens at Chesil Bay near Southampton. And there are a number of different manufacturers and organisations working around the area, and it's not always easy to know where that pollution has come from. But where we can attribute that, we can take action. We also work proactively with businesses that may have caused some pollution in some way, shape or form, and look at their operations with them. Also trade associations, to try and reduce in a proactive way that release of things like the small plastic pellets and the nurdles. And there's an Operation Clean Sweep that the British Plastics Federation is involved with, which we're also involved with, to try and sign organisations up to deal with that nurdle pollution. We're also working with businesses and academics to try and investigate some of those types and sources of plastics. So what we're doing internally, we have an E-Mission Internal Sustainability Action Plan, and there's a number of different initiatives we've taken across our Environment Agency estate and operations, including on things like catering and vending. Our operational teams take out drinking water bottles. We've got a laboratory service where there's quite a lot of changes we've taken on site to do with the way that we carry out our laboratory work, sampling methods to reduce avoidable plastics. And there's various different contracts that we've looked at working with supply chain to try and reuse items and look at packaging. Our IT equipment, a lot of that came in a lot of packaging. We've been working closely with a lot of different suppliers to try and reduce that and change it. We also look at how we use our pension fund money and how we engage our staff and the people that we work with as well. So the Environment Agency is involved in an Interreg European funded Preventing Plastic Pollution project, and this runs from 2020 to 2023. We're in the middle of it at the moment, and this has a number of different elements. One of those is related to science, technology, engineering and maths education. So working with young people, schools, to educate people on the impacts of plastic pollution and what we can all do about it. We've developed a number of resources for colleges and schools, and including agricultural colleges as well, to look at plastics in agriculture. We work with a number of community groups, and particularly our work is focused on the Solent area. A number of the other partners involved in the Preventing Plastic Pollution project work across the south of England and north of France, but our focus is on the Solent area. We've set up a Solent Plastic Pollution Hub with the Solent Forum, so do look that up if you're interested. And we're providing resources to communities and that hub to help them link up. We're also talking to businesses and business networks, such as yourselves, about some of the impacts. And we also have some internal projects, as I've just mentioned. We're looking at a source to sea approach, so recognising that 80% of plastics that end up in the ocean have started on land. So we're also working with river catchment partnerships, and we're producing a number of case studies, including on our own laboratories, and recently ran a lab plastics webinar for organisations with labs. So yeah, we're collaborating with local authorities as well as business networks and partnerships, focusing on smaller and medium businesses, recognising they probably need more support than the larger organisations. And I'll provide a link at the end of this presentation to our online resources and case studies, in case those are useful for you. We're also encouraging businesses to sign up a plastic reduction charter, certification or commitment, whatever it looks like for you or for them that is most suitable to take a look at this. So what can you do? What can we do, I should say? Number one, obviously you've all seen this waste hierarchy before. It's kind of commonly displayed, and yeah, avoiding plastics we need to look at as the primary thing. So we want to kind of do that avoiding, rethinking, reducing or refilling before we jump straight to that recycling. At the end, it's quite tempting sometimes to jump to that, but to look at that avoiding first. Another thing to think about is not to replace an item with another single-use one. Sometimes it's tempting to replace maybe a single-use plastic cup with a single-use compostable one, but it's worth remembering that many of those compostable items are only industrially compostable, not home compostable, so they do often end up in a landfill or incineration. Also, any single-use product has an impact, so sometimes we do need them, but if there's a way of reducing or rethinking or having a reusable item, that's always a better option if possible. Other things that we can all do, carrying out a plastic audit is a great idea at the beginning. So it's always tempting some to jump in to take an action, but actually taking stock of where you're at is useful. And on our project website, Preventing Plastic Pollution website, there is a practical guide that the West Country Rivers Trust have produced on reducing business waste and saving money. And that's a useful guide that we can give you a link to. Then, whilst carrying out that guide, you can identify avoidable plastics to eliminate or reduce, or items that could be reused and refilled. It might be that you can't eliminate an item, but by reducing perhaps the thickness of it, you might reduce the content of plastic in it, or something like that. And then, if you do need to recycle, sorting correct, clean, dry recyclables for collection is really important. We've got a trial innovative recycling infrastructure project at Southampton University, where we're looking at what is the best way to collect recyclable plastics, and then with good signage and good infrastructure to enable that the best materials are collected in a way that they can then be recycled, and to improve that recycling rate, reduce contamination of recyclables. Talk and listen to your staff, customers and suppliers. We do this at the Environment Agency. We find it really helps to get ideas from others. We've set up a plastic champion network across the organisation, and that's now gone across the whole civil service with over 600 people joined. And we get lots of ideas from that network. They also act as champions to relay messages and enthuse people about reducing plastics. So yeah, you can designate a plastic champion or more, depending on the size of your organisation. That might be your sustainability champion, it might be someone different, but it's a great idea to have that person or those individuals taking a look at where they work, how they operate, and talking to colleagues. Those messages can be spread amongst your customers, suppliers and colleagues. This is a real topic for discussion, and sometimes it's actually a route in to talk about other sustainability issues we find. Sometimes you can get people engaged on the plastics debate and the plastics issues, and then actually that gives a kind of way into wider sustainability conversations. There's several key dates that might be useful to promote messages and get people involved. World Environment Day is coming up on the 5th of June. We've got World Ocean Day on the 8th of June, and we've got Plastic Free July. And these are all great opportunities to promote messages and get some actions done. On the right here, this is a plastic bingo card that we produce as one of our resources within our project. So it's something fun you could do with colleagues, or team, or at home or in communities. Share those successes. I think not all of us are always good at sharing what we do. So getting those plastic reduction successes out there, and with challenges, again, why not share the challenges with other businesses or with your customers and suppliers, staff, ask for ideas and feedback. Another idea is to have an environmental volunteer day or team build. We've got one of these coming up in Southsea Common. If it's not too far for you to come along, I can give you the link to that. We've got an Eventbrite sign up on the 7th of June, and we're just taking that as an opportunity for communities or business teams to come along and try out a Litter Pick event and get involved. Link with community groups is always a great idea as well. This is a link to our project resources, and I can stick it in the chat afterwards as well. Or I think Wendy said that there's going to be the slides going around afterwards, so you'll be able to see this, but it's a simple sort of website address. And we've got things like the practical guide I mentioned. We've got some poster resources, the 5 R's to preventing plastic pollution. We've got webinars you can rewatch on supply chain and lab plastics. So there's a number of resources on there for you. So do scan that if you'd like to have a look at those. Then the other thing we'd like you to do, if possible, is to sign up to a plastic reduction commitment. And we've collaborated with the Final Straw Foundation, who are based in the Solent area. And this is a link here, which again could be shared afterwards. This takes you through to a Google Doc form where you can just enter a few details and tick some of the things. There's some ideas of things there that actions you could take. So by taking that first step, you might find that actually kind of gives a boost to the actions in this area. And just coming up to the end of the presentation now, just a reminder that your influence is bigger than you think. So your behaviour and actions do make a difference. Every conversation you have, anything you put on social media, any way you lead by example, you can help enable others. Even if you organise events, where you reduce plastics, you're all the time influencing others. The end of my presentation. Thank you for your time. And there's a link to our team email address, plastics and sustainability environmentagency.gov.uk. Do please get in touch if you've got any questions or ideas, would like any further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've just got a couple of minutes. There's a couple of questions. So we'll see if we get through them quite quickly. And just on the consistency of household recycling bit, I know there's some concern that we'll kind of go for the lowest common denominator. So rather than everyone being able to recycle everything, we're going to reduce the household recycling to the barest minimum. Do you have any idea of which way that's going to go?
No, my understanding, it should mean, well, a consistent set will mean that anyone travelling anywhere, or there'll be less confusion about what can be recycled. So when you travel on holiday, when you're on the go, it'll just mean that you know what you can recycle. It'll be the same everywhere. In most cases, I don't think it will reduce what is offered. There are still quite a few local authorities that don't already collect pots, tubs and trays. Plastic pots, tubs and trays from homes, or Tetra Packs. Many local authorities don't already collect food waste. So there's a lot there that will be expanded. And I think that is far outweighs anything that would be reduced. So I know some local authorities collect, for example, batteries and others. I haven't heard that that will be taken away. I think the plan is to have that consistent set, and then some authorities may be able to collect extra. But others on this call might know more than me, so thank you, Duncan.
Yeah. But we think it'll be authorities catching up as opposed to
absolutely,
bringing
yeah. I think
it'd
really be a really positive thing. Yeah. So yeah.
And then a question about the nurdles and the plastics industry.
Yes.
And actually, yeah, this is something I've seen for myself. I visited a local recycler. It was pre-pandemic, so it must be 2 or 3 years ago now. So very impressive process, sorting plastics by type and by colour, and then grinding and remelting, ready for reuse. But certainly their plant was covered in plastic dust, both inside and out. So when you say you're working with the plastics industry, is that technology changes that prevent that dust, or sort of better housekeeping to try and clear it up, or what is it they can do?
Absolutely, both those things. But the main thing we've been working with organisations in, and this includes in the Solent area, has been the housekeeping, as you said. Amazingly, not all of the businesses had effective ways of keeping the nurdles in when they escaped through transportation or through handling. So a lot of it is actually things that it's to do with the drainage system, it's to do with bunds, it's to do with packaging of the nurdles themselves and transportation. So actually some of that is actually more basic than you would imagine, and not that high technology. And they were escaping, and a lot of the businesses are actually right near watercourses, so it's quite easy for the nurdles to escape into the environment. So so some of it is actually some quite kind of basic pollution control measures that you would employ for any kind of pollution control.
Okay, thank you. And then, just lastly, sorry, we're overrunning slightly. And actually, this might be a nice link to Ryan's talk in a second. You mentioned the uni recycling and suggesting people trying to sort their plastics better.
Yes.
But do the waste processes exist with the contractors to collect plastics separately? If you've sorted your plastic into 3 different buckets, does the industry is the industry in the position now to actually take those plastics separately?
Yeah, so I mean that would completely vary on the company that's collecting the waste and where it's going to. So we're working with Suez at Southampton University on this project with the innovative recycling infrastructure. Obviously, it's of higher value to the waste collection company if it's already sorted and they can sell it on as it is. But yes, you make a good point. A lot of materials do go off to a material recycling facility and they're sorted anyway. But as things move on in the future, the items are going to have more value if they're already sorted and they're kind of a clean recyclable component that can then be made straight into new products. So but yeah, absolutely great point, Duncan. So that's all part of this pilot really, and the results from that will be published towards the end of the year. It's a 6-month pilot, and it'll be available for all universities and local authorities to look at. to kind of learn from not only the physical infrastructure, but also some of the signage and what made people change behaviour. We've done a lot of surveying amongst the students at Southampton University of why did they recycle, why they didn't, and then we'll do it afterwards again. So
great, thank you very much. Well, that's a
thank you.
great moment then to hand over to Ryan from Grundon's Waste Management and get his take on what the industry is doing. So Ryan, if you can grab the screen and show your presentation, that'd be great.
Okay, so yeah, thank you everyone that's spoken already. It's again, I've just made some really key notes that I'll be feeding back into my sales meetings as well. A couple of sort of the World Ocean Days and Plastic Free July, really interesting. So thank you very much. Just thought I'd start, if anyone doesn't know who Grundon are, I wanted to just sort of get to grips with what our infrastructure is and how we operate. So yeah, we've got a number of waste transfer stations, 6 in total. Waste transfer stations are basically hubs of where the recycling, general waste and other waste streams are tipped and then dealt with post that. So going to obviously moving on to these facilities where the waste is transferred from the stations to material recovery facilities, which Sophie just touched on, which is obviously all about the separation and recovery of recycled materials. We obviously have an energy from waste facility based in Colnbrook, pretty much the mothership of Grundon, where we divert trade waste from landfill. We also have a clinical waste incinerator based at that plant as well, which is burning a little bit higher at 1200 degrees as opposed to the 800 degrees at the energy from waste facility. Clinical waste is obviously sharps and all the nasty offensive stuff, which we obviously divert from landfill as well. We've got a large fleet that we own, which is all carbon neutral due to a reforestation project in Uganda that we process, and we've got the certification to send across to customers as part of their ISOs and accreditations. And we are in the process. I heard someone mention about the university, Winchester University, converting or starting with electric vehicles. We have just converted 2 waste vehicles over to electric, and we're trialing them. So we used old vehicles to convert rather than buying them in. So we're reusing those as well. And at the same time, as part of our company, I think we've got about 40 to 45 people out of the 105 company car users that are now on electric cars, and I've just ordered mine as well, so I'm very excited. And yeah, we're the largest waste management and aggregates company in the UK as well, privately owned. Just a quick one on the operating area. We've got 10 depots across the south of England that deal with trade waste, and obviously we've got, as I mentioned, the clinical waste department and our hazardous waste department, which deal with the recycling of aerosols. We've got the largest aerosol recycling facility in Europe, which recycles the full process of an aerosol can, including the gas left inside, the filter and the can itself. We have 4 quarries as well, so it's how Grundon started off essentially, and you are able to tip there, and obviously we supply the aggregates materials as well. Just a quick touch on, I heard someone again, I think Sophie mentioned about litter picking as well. So we have quite a substantial events team that we obviously supply sort of waste containers and stands for segregation of recycling at events, as we know that it's not great, but yeah, we supply that, and litter picking and sorting tables. So we really look to increase the recycling at events, as we know it's quite a big struggle. So as quite a few the last 2 speakers have spoken about the plastic, so the resource and waste strategy that sort of affects sort of our industry as in terms of disposal is obviously the plastic tax, 1st of April 2022. Consistency in collections is going to be a large, as again Duncan just mentioned. So is it going to be, so at the moment commercially we're dealing with very sort of limited, we collect DMR, which is dry mixed recycling. So that is a commingled service of paper, cardboard, plastics as in HDPE, which is higher density polyethylene, PET, polyethylene and PP. And then obviously paper, cardboard mixed with the aluminium cans and tins. So we offer that as a dry mix recycling service because we are able to separate and recover ourselves at our own facilities. But obviously the consistency, where the amount of office buildings I've been to where people have a completely different approach at home into what they can recycle there, and then come into work and it's completely reduced. So the consistency over both household and commercial will be a massive bonus to us and should see a rise in that waste. Deposit return schemes, obviously, as we've mentioned already, plastic bottles and cans. That's going to be a large, which I'll touch on in a second. And obviously the EPR, the extended producer responsibility, which I'll also touch on in the next few slides. So the two main, realistically, whilst talks are obviously ongoing with what's going to be finalised with waste management companies and how we're going to be operating, the two main waste producer impacts are going to be the mandatory take back scheme for the paper cups, the fibre-based cups, which only applies to businesses employing more than 10 full-time employees, and the compostable and biodegradable packaging, which I know is a taboo subject, but it must be labelled as do not recycle until we find that solution. There is one facility, I believe, within the UK that is trialling this at the moment, and obviously we will always be talking to those suppliers, but it's very difficult where biodegradable and compostable packaging, the concern is that it's obviously what it's used for, which is food. So the contamination of the food has to be removed, and obviously that separate service has to be supplied, like the paper cup situation, where you will have to have separate bins on site, you will have to have a separate collection service, there will be separate costs to that, and it's ongoing from there. So Papercut Recycling, we launched that in 2018, made a breakthrough of that. There's no sign up fee, so it's completely obviously part of your contract that we would install that with. So we're part of we're board members of the Papercut Recycling group, which is obviously linked to leading drinks brands such as Costa, Starbucks, Pret, Lavazza, etc. And so apologise for that. And yeah, the coverage is across our operating area, as I was just touched on. We've got all of the, as you can see on the right, we've got internal and external color-coded bins. We've got a fleet of vehicles as down below, and obviously we can provide data on in terms of weights for those coffee cups, so you can they add to your recycling rates in terms of the reporting. And it's a closed loop cycle, so that paper cup is then sent to a reprocessing plant, which is called James Cropper in Cumbria, where that cup is 100% recycled. So it's split into, so you've obviously got the 10% plastic and 90% paper, and that full cup is then recycled into office printer paper, which you as a customer can buy back from us. In terms of the EPR and the packaging producers, with what's happening, we're a partner business to Vanden Recycling. They are based in Peterborough. They deal with sort of your obscurity plastics, as such as plastic hangers, PET crates, trays, film. These are in large quantities. So again, with these new legislations coming in, we will always be talking to Vanden and what containers we can provide. So, for example, quite a few large shopping centres that we deal with. We have 40-yarders or balers, 40-yard containers, sorry, balers that bale the plastic hangers, because they're not accepted in normal DMR collections. We offer that specialised collection for those specific plastics. I have quite a few PDFs on that, so if anyone wants me to send them over to them in terms of what they accept, I'll be more than happy to do so. And a massive part of that is plastic banding. They bale those up, they grind them, and they obviously then sell that on to be reused within sort of playground equipment or other uses. We purchase obviously quite a few large volumes of fibre and plastic packaging from customers. We're able to offer rebates for that, and as part of that, we can supply the balers to increase the material value of that. So in terms of us supplying the balers, we would install provide familiarisation with how to use those balers, and then obviously the storing of the cardboard or the plastics or whatever you're baling there on site. We will then provide a rebate to that. So it's a great incentive. A really good incentive that we've made a very recent acquisition for, which I think quite a few of you would like to see in action, would be the Grundon reverse vending kiosk. So it kind of comes into the deposit scheme as an incentive. So we've trialled these at quite a few universities, Brunel University being one of them, where we can wrap the machine on the right hand side in colours of the universities or wherever. These can apply to anywhere. It doesn't have to be the educational side of things. This can be in canteens of office buildings. It's just a real incentive. Again, what Duncan touched on was, although this will be a situation where you will be sorry, I'll explain this first. So the deposit return scheme with the reverse vendor skills is basically for plastic bottles and drinks cans. We can link that to incentives of money off certain. We can link that to gift shops on site. We can link that to money off food in the canteen. We can link it to iTunes vouchers, etc., etc. The list goes on of what we can link that to. But it's just that main incentive of scanning in your plastic bottles and your cans as a separate collection point. These sort of materials are ignored of within DMR. Cardboard is a main one, but these sort of materials are ignored of if the incorrect sort of signage and bins internally aren't in place. This could be the hub of recycling your main plastic bottles and cans from site. So it acts as a collection point. And obviously, as I was just mentioning with Duncan, he mentioned about, does that mean that these will get collected separately? At the moment, no, but it's peace of mind for yourselves that you will have that collection point. These will be clean, and these will then be put into the DMR bins that you have on site, which we will then collect. Again, you've done the work for us on site, so we can guarantee that these are majority clean, and then obviously being put in the DMR where they'll be separated and recovered back at the facilities. So a bit of a facility investment that we're making in terms of sort of future plans of the EPR regulations. We obviously understand it would make a change to the recycling mix, so we will be speaking to suppliers of the sort of the supply chain of these plastics to get an understanding of, or give them advice on what they can use and what we can recycle as a company, so they can use that within what they are buying in or what they are distributing, which then moves on to investing in our new facilities, so we can recover those materials and obviously be flexible with how customers are changing their requirements on site. The first sort of change we made is the first robotic sorter, which uses artificial intelligence to separate certain products within the DMR recycling situation. And my understanding is that robot picker sorts using image recognition, and it can pick up to, I believe, 75 items per minute. So it obviously gets rid of human interaction. We'll still be reprocessing on sort of conveyor belts, as you can see there. But yeah, if this first robotic sorter works and we can install them across our 10 depots the 4 material recovery facilities, and really delve down into clean recycling. So I thought I'd touch on, after the sort of regulations, that as part of, or probably the one we've seen the most change so far this year, even though it's obviously not come into place yet, is the new food legislation. So obviously DEFRA, the Department of Environmental and Food Rural Affairs, will be unveiling plans to make it mandatory for you to separate your food waste from other waste. And that's not just commercially, that's households as well, where they're not doing it at the moment. I understand there's quite a few boroughs and councils that are providing that scheme at the moment, but obviously it's all about consistency. And obviously we'll see a massive rise in that food waste situation going into the anaerobic digestion plants. We've got plenty of capacity for those of where we're tipping, certainly. But obviously the food and drink waste hierarchy will always prioritise preventing the excess food and the waste in the first place, but obviously it's then redistributing the mass food to those food banks, charities, where possible, where the food is obviously eligible. But obviously it then recognises that where this can't be done, recycling and recovery of that food should be the preferred measure. And obviously the aim of that is to reach the 65% recycling rate in the UK. I believe this legislation will be coming in sort of 2023, 24 again, but it's sort of the leading legislation at the moment for us, the changes that customers are reading into. The effects, realistically, yeah, if institutions wise, you're looking at public institutions, hospitals, prisons, schools. I must admit, it applies to any business, to be quite honest. We're talking 5 kg of waste per week, which is what the allowance is looking to be, which looking at the list of items here, tea bags, coffee grounds, stuff like that's going to amount to over 5 kg already. So you're looking at, regardless of the size of the business, I believe this will apply to majority of commercial customers that will be needing a separate food waste collection. As part of that, we can obviously supply the caddies, on which we can see on the right hand side, which I'll touch on a bit on the next few slides. But yeah, RAP, the Waste and Resources Action Programme, did find that evidence that most businesses do produce that 5 kg of food waste per week. So the response to that, realistically, we don't need to respond very quickly to that. We've had food waste segregation in place for a long time now. I think it's over 5 years. As part of my role now is to sell that 4-bin system to customers, where obviously you have a general waste bin on site, dry mix recycling, food and glass where applicable. Obviously now with this legislation coming in, food waste will be applicable. But yeah, there's the infrastructure is there. We've got plenty of capacity tipping into anaerobic digestion plants, which again, food waste is so important to segregate because it does exactly what general waste does in terms of incineration, where it generates renewable electricity, feeding to the national grid, and obviously then produces that natural biofertilizer, which we then sell on to agricultural businesses. So it's all being reused. It's also the main benefit of it is that it's 5 times cheaper than what is than the disposal of general waste. So that's the key point. So there's plenty of capacity to do so. We've got a dedicated collection fleet. We've got weighing facilities on pretty much all of our vehicles now, so we will be able to report back to customers on what weights they are producing within the food bins, which then turns to a point of providing that information will then allow you to access stock control. Are you buying too much in? Reducing the waste that you're producing, portion sizes, etc., etc. We've got a lot of literature on that will help and drive businesses to really delve into what they're buying in and reducing the amount of food waste they are throwing away. We see it in a lot of schools and universities in terms of bulk buying and overselling the products. So yeah, as much as we can collect it and recycle it, we want to see a massive reduction in that. As part of that, again, internal caddies for kitchens, offices, kitchenettes, any way you can think possible, we can provide a small internal caddy as you are provided with at home. And obviously the external part of it is they're newly designed bins with non-spill lidded designs. Food waste can be seen as quite dirty and smelly, but these bins actually provide a design where the odor has got that non-spill lid. So once that's closed, you can't smell anything. Once kicked over, nothing spills out, etc., etc. And a bin exchange service. So as part of that, in terms of the infrastructure of our food waste collection service, we provide a bin exchange service, or will be providing it due to COVID delaying it getting back on the road. But in terms of bin exchange service, we will then swap out those full bins and supply fresh, sanitized, disinfected bins with a sack lining the bin. Just a bit of literature around that food waste legislation. We can provide stuff like this, kind of labelled as a menu, to really just delve into kitchen audits that we can do. We can talk to all of the head chefs, resulting in what they think is the best way of moving forward as well. Segregation of food from general waste, monitoring processes, and then obviously stock control, portion sizes, as mentioned before. Just in terms of literature as well, this is what we kind of provide on a sort of simple basis of what these are sort of university handouts from university we send out to staff and students and stuff like that. These can apply to large sort of venture parks. They can be handed out to customers that are attending, just to really sort of drive that education of what can be accepted around the bins that customers will be disposing of their waste around. And obviously there's challenges. So the main sort of challenge that we have is contamination. There's multi-users of service on site, being one of them being obviously with Duncan being at Marwell. We're relying on customers to segregate that waste around the site. So we do understand there's going to be that level of contamination. But yeah, we manage that as do our drivers. We report on that. We allow you to understand in what areas this is happening and what we can do to result in changing that concept. It was really to get that consistent message across with continuous engagement. As you can see on the right, we do waste awareness days at certain office buildings. I can do them at any sort of situation where there's customer interaction. I can interact with anyone on site to get them to understand how important it is to segregate their waste around the site. And we can do the main thing is really as all the facilities I've talked about, we do duty of care tours. So if anyone interested on this call would be interested in going around the energy from waste facility or anaerobic digestion plants, Papercut Recycling facilities, anything that I've mentioned on this chat, we can show you around free of charge, no problem at all. We wish to educate you. We don't. If you come to us, I wish we could show everyone in the UK around what we're doing and how we're reprocessing these waste streams. So if anyone wanted to, I can put my email on these, send it over to Wendy, and then we can obviously distribute that across. And that concludes. If any questions, I can answer moving forward as well.
Thanks very much, Brian. We are overrunning slightly, so we did have a couple of questions, but we'll try and fit those in at the end.
Sure.
With time. So I'll hand it straight over to Ella if you want to try and grab the screen.
Thanks very much, Duncan. Okay.
Yep, we've got that. Thank you.
All good. Thanks very much. So hi, everyone. I'm Ella Yarrow, and I'm a sustainability consultant at Ridge & Partners. So we're a multidisciplinary construction consultancy based in Winchester. And I'm here to talk to you today about combating waste through circular thinking. And I'd like to begin this presentation with some key facts because I love a good fact and I find it puts important issues into perspective. So the first one is that it's estimated that less than a quarter of adults in the UK can confidently understand and explain the term circular economy, which is why I'm here today and improve that understanding. And my next fact is that we all know that there's only one planet Earth, yet by 2050, the world will be consuming as much as if there were three. And our global consumption of materials such as biomass, fossil fuels, metals and minerals is expected to double in the next 40 years, while annual waste stream generation is projected to increase by 70% by 2050. So it's evident from these facts that as our consumption is spiralling upwards, the carrying capacity of the planet is falling, which is a huge problem and is where the circular economy approach comes in. So what is a circular approach? Now, in our current economy, we take the materials from the earth, we make products from them, and we eventually throw them away as waste. And as Duncan said earlier, this doesn't have to be considered as waste, but more as a material opportunity. And it's this shift in behaviour and thinking which is key, because current process is linear and has been driven by an abundance of cheap and easily disposable resources. Now, this approach has obviously had devastating impacts on our planet and produces negative consequences, including rising carbon emissions, increased pressures on landfill, unsustainable levels of water consumption, and ecosystem pollution. Whereas with the circular economy, we stop waste being produced in the first place, and instead we use, we reuse, remake, recycle and make, and the cycle then repeats again. And I think Peter and Ryan have already kind of given great examples of this in practice with the deposit return scheme for drinks containers and the Grundon reverse vending kiosks as well. And this approach offers a chance to make the step change we need, which is decoupling economic growth from resource consumption as well. And using circular thinking, products are designed and manufactured to be more durable, repairable, reusable, and able to be disassembled in the first place, which eliminates that waste. So this diagram looks at the concept in more detail, and it's a circular economy system diagram known as the butterfly diagram, and has been produced by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a great resource for anything to do with the circular economy. And it's great to see that Sophie referred to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation earlier. And this illustrates the continuous flow of materials within the economy and demonstrates the difference between those two main cycles. So you've got biological on the left and technical on the right. So starting with the biological cycle on the left, which involves materials that would biodegrade, so food, wood or cotton, for example. The nutrients from biodegradable materials are eventually returned to the earth after their consumption through composting and anaerobic digestion, which allows the land to regenerate so this cycle can continue. And then on the other hand, on the right, your technical cycle encompasses anything that doesn't biodegrade, so metals and plastics. And in this cycle, products remain in circulation through reuse, repair, remanufacture and recycling, so are continuously kept in use. And in a circular economy approach, it's important to distinguish between, because of using a clear approach, we combine biological materials with the technical materials in ways that they can't be separated. So a good example of this is clothing made with a polycotton, where different fibres, so your polyester and your cotton, can't be easily recovered and reused. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, DEFRA's plans to separate food waste from other waste is a step in the right direction here. And one particular subtlety of this diagram is the distinction between consumers and users as well. So in a circular economy, biological materials are the only ones that can be thought of as consumable, or technical materials are used, which shows how we view our relationship with materials. And this distinction also raises questions about the necessity of owning products as well, in the way that we traditionally do. So it's access to a service of a product that the product provides that's important rather than the product itself. So what is the benefit of actually owning something? And understanding this shift in mindset lays the groundwork to many of the practicalities of shifting our economy from linear to circular. Why is this the solution? Our linear model is clearly no longer fit for purpose, and it's failing both people and the planet. And circular economy strategies have the potential to be instrumental in tackling economic and environmental issues. So starting with economic benefits on the left, DEFRA calculates that UK businesses could benefit by up to £23 billion per year through low cost or no cost improvement in the efficient use of resources. And this economic growth will be achieved mainly through a combination of increased revenues from emerging circular activities and lower cost of production through the more productive utilisation of inputs. And the shift to a circular economy means using less virgin material and more recycled inputs, which reduces companies' exposure to volatile raw material prices within the threat of supply chain disruptions, which are also reduced. And it's estimated that in the sector of complex medium lift products, so mobile phones and washing machines, for example, in the EU, the annual net material cost saving opportunity amounts to up to $630 billion US. An analysis shows that a circular economy could increase the disposable income of the average European household by €3,000 per year by 2030 as well. New jobs will also be created across the industrial sector within small and medium enterprises through increased innovation and entrepreneurship and a new service-based economy as well. And circular solutions also offer new ways to creatively engage your customers, where businesses will gain a unique insight into usage patterns to improve their products and services too. So on to environmental benefits on the right. For Europe, a circular economy development path could halve CO2 emissions by 2030 relative to today's levels across sectors such as mobility, food systems and the built environment. An adoption of a circular economy approach could also reduce in the reduction of primary material consumption by just over a third by 2030. So that's across cars, construction materials, synthetic fertilizers, non-renewables and pesticides. And the point about pesticides in particular translates to lower healthcare costs associated with pesticide use by up to $550 billion globally, since the antimicrobial resistance, air pollution, water contamination, and foodborne diseases would also be reduced. So it's kind of that domino effect. And land degradation costs over $40 billion annually worldwide, which can also be combated with a circular approach, encouraging regeneration through higher land productivity, less waste in the food value chain, and returning nutrients to the soil to enhance the value of land. And recovering this nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from animal and human waste streams globally could contribute 2.7 times the nutrients contained within the volume of chemical fertilizers currently used too. Where are we now? In 2020, it was estimated that 8.6% of the global economy was circular, and 2 years before that, it was actually higher at 9.1%. And this represents a widening of the circular economy gap, which is due to 3 reasons. So an increase in extracted resources, more resources entering the economy, and lower levels of end-use processing and recycling. And closing this circularity gap and adopting circular thinking serves the higher objective of preventing further environmental degradation and social inequality through the benefits I've just explained as well. And we know that some countries operate well within those ecological boundaries of our planet, but without satisfying basic social needs, whereas other countries do fulfill societal needs, but do so by overshooting the sustainable means of the planet. But many are confronted with the same global trends exacerbated by a linear economy, which is why this is so important. So now moving on to some real world examples, which demonstrates the application of this innovative circular thinking. So the first one is Apeel, which is a Californian company which has come up with an innovative way to eliminate single-use shrink-wrap plastic packaging on fresh fruit and vegetables, while at the same time tackling food waste. And Apeel is a layer of edible plant-based coating applied to the fresh products that mimics and enhances the natural defences of fruit and vegetables. And using this technique, it designs out food waste by preventing produce from prematurely rotting, plastic waste as no man-made packaging is needed, and energy and resource waste by covering one avocado with Apeel, 23 litres of water and enough energy to charge a smartphone 9 times over is saved. The second example is Gerrard Street, which has pioneered a subscription service for its modular headphones in the Netherlands. And this modular design allows for 85% of components to be reused. And their products use durable, standardized design, which means that fewer virgin materials are used to create new headphones. And their business model aims to cut down on the millions of tons of precious metals and electronic waste that ends up in landfill every year. And the subscription model allows Gerrard Street to recover and recycle headphones at the end of their life, when customers can return headphones for an upgrade or just get a complete replacement. Now, the next example is Natura, which is South America's largest cosmetic company and also the 5th largest beauty company in the world, producing a huge range of products, so soap, shampoos, creams, all of which rely on the rich biodiversity of the Amazon rainforest, as well as the biointelligence of the local communities that work there. And a key element of Natura's business model is the concept of a standing forest economy. So this means that a tree has much more economic value standing up than being cut down. And this philosophy has preserved over 2 million hectares of the Amazon rainforest so far. And they've got the goal of increasing this area to 3 million hectares by 2030. And they do this through ensuring that the trees aren't cut down for timber and instead harvested for seeds and leaves and other resources, which is more sustainable and earns farmers more money as well. Now, the last example is De Kleek, which uses cycle couriers and electric vehicles in the Netherlands. And these are used to collect food byproducts like coffee grounds, orange peels, and other food waste from businesses. And these inedible food byproducts and other organic waste streams are usually sent to landfill or incinerated. Whereas De Kleek keeps these materials in use by collecting them and separating them to turn into high value products which stay in the economy. And these products are then sold on by De Kleek to third-party innovators and product manufacturers who transform them into new products like ingredients, cosmetics, and biomaterials. So just as an example, for every kilo of food waste turned into compost and later sold to consumers, 0.6 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions are avoided. So obviously that's all well and good, but what can we do? And based on what I've discussed today, I would hope that you're all kind of feeling inspired to take action and are left wondering what you can do as an individual to help build and transition towards a more circular economy. Now, following 3 simple principles encouraged by the World Resources Institute is how you can start this step change. So the first one is to consume less. Obviously, we consume far too much, and in a world where people in the richest countries consume 10 times as much as the poorest, there's a need for many of us to reduce our consumption. So, for instance, around fast fashion, single-use plastics, as we've talked about, and food waste as well. The second point is to consume better. So as well as consuming less, we've got the capability and the power to consume better. So for individuals, this can mean choosing versions of products that have been produced in more sustainable ways and that can be recycled. And as Sophie spoke about earlier, the waste hierarchy is a really useful tool in ensuring that better thinking is followed here as well. The last point is systemic change. And obviously consumers can only do so much when the economy is built on a take, make and waste model, so our linear economy. And what we need is systemic change, so that sustainability doesn't only depend on consumer choices. So furthering our knowledge, sharing that knowledge and raising consumer awareness of circular economy principles through talks like this today, we'll see more companies hopefully adopting circular business models because it will put them at a clear business advantage. And the sphere of influence that Sophie showed us earlier on her slide is a powerful kind of indicator on how our influence can be used there. And obviously implementing these changes can be achieved by supporting local schemes and businesses. And examples that I've included on the left-hand side of the slide. So the first one I found is Community Repaint, which is a UK-wide paint reuse network which collects leftover paint and redistributes it to benefit individuals, families and communities and charities in need. And they sell these paints at an affordable cost. And this network's made up of over 65 schemes, one of which is Southampton. Second example is TerraCycle, which is a great recycling company which offers a range of free programs funded by popular brands, manufacturers and retailers around the world. And they offer solutions for typically hard to recycle waste streams, so confectionery packaging, crisp packets, plastic cheese packaging, toothpaste tubes, soap bottles. And you can also support independent local businesses as well, so Earthian in Winchester that spoke on the last SBN. And other examples include Lemon and Ginger in Romsey, the Naked Pantry in New Milton, Fleet Scoop in Fleet, and Local Zero in Stockbridge. So those are all in Hampshire. So thank you all for listening today, and I hope my presentation has furthered your understanding of the circular economy and the behavioural shift needed to transition. And I've popped some useful resources on the slide which have formed the basis of my presentation and where I've got all my fun facts from. Including link to case study examples. So that's me.
Thank you very much. Lots of really useful links there, particularly. Oh, my camera working. There we go. Right, I've just got a couple of minutes left. So quick question for you, Ella. And lots of good examples there of circular companies who are trying to operate in the new fashion. They're all new startups. Do you think existing companies who are very much entrenched in their traditional ways of working, is there scope for them to change, or do we think actually they're likely to get sort of what's the word, pushed out essentially by new startups that are starting up in a different way of working?
I mean that is the challenge, isn't it? And I think that they will be forced to because of their competitors. So these new startups, I don't think they'll end up having a choice. And I think eventually, government will introduce kind of policies and procedures where they'll have to adopt this thinking. Otherwise, they're gonna lose out on business. So yeah. I think that's the biggest challenge, because it's that big behavioural shift, and it is a monumentous challenge for us to shift our thinking on an economy we've relied on for years.
Okay, not too scary then.
No, it's not. Well, yes, it is, but no, but it's a good opportunity. The main thing is the opportunity, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. And just very quickly, Ryan, if we could just link back to one of the questions that was for yourselves. On your reverse vending machines, it mentioned there were, I think, it gave you a voucher for money off your next drink. I'm not sure if this is a question for yourself or Peter, actually, but with the deposit return scheme, does that meet the requirements of the deposit return, giving you a voucher for your next drink, or do you actually have to give people cash?
I certainly believe that we can obviously link it to, so once that deposit return scheme, so we've already launched these reverse vending kiosks before any deposit return scheme comes in. So it's obviously in motion now, but when that does come into play with the deposit return scheme and the extra money on plastic bottles and cans, where you then can take them back to retail shops, then we would obviously tie that into the reverse vending and sort of give them the cash back from that situation rather than yourselves from the gift shops, etc.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's just about all we've got time for today. We're just about out of time. If I could just remind everyone, the feedback form link is still there. So if you haven't filled it in yet, do please fill that one in and look out for our next events as they come up. So just finally to say thank you again to our speakers, Peter, Sophie, Ryan and Ella, who've all been very good this morning. The presentations will be available, so all of those links, if you haven't jotted them down, you can pick them up from the Carbon Footprint SBN webpage after the event. So thank you very much, speakers and everyone who attended.